Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Jonathan Cohn, and today I have a book review of the book The Emperor's Plague by Rebecca Moesta and Kevin J. Anderson, the final book in the Diversity Alliance arc of the Young Jedi Knights series. For people who have watched the channel for a while, people know I love this series. I'm a big fan of not only Kevin J. Anderson and Rebecca Moesta, and not only of Star Wars books, but specifically this series of Star Wars books, which I think they've overall done a very good job with. These books have a special place in my heart because when I was younger, I was not a book reader. When I was a elementary student and middle school student, I did not care about reading, did not want to. I could read, and I was reading at good levels, but I just didn't want to. Nothing interested me, and all the books they wanted, my teachers wanted me to read, my librarians wanted me to read, I'd read, and they were depressing, and they were sad, and they weren't types of books a boy wants to read, and so I spent a lot of my life just not wanting to read. And then my brother-in-law, my sister's husband, suggested to me that I read this book series that he had read as a kid called The Young Jedi Knights. And he let me borrow some of his books. He didn't have all of them, but he let me borrow the ones that he had. And it was a delightful time. And one of those books was The Emperor's Plague. Now, this was almost a decade ago that this happened, so I really don't remember much about what happened in this book. But I remember the process of reading it, and there were certain scenes that stood out. One in particular that I just clearly remember. But it's been a while, like literally a decade, and I was a kid at the time, so it was pretty much brand new to me. And so it was a great time to experience this now as a teacher. I now teach kids that were the age that I was when I read this. And so I'm actually going to be putting these books in my classroom, which I'm excited about. But this book is utterly delightful. For sure the best book in the arc. And really does an amazing job of tying up all the loose ends in this arc of books. So to give a quick overview of this specific arc of the Young Jedi Knights, you have the book Shards of Alderaan, which is the first time that you hear about Born and Thol being missing. And I'll be honest, this is a mediocre book. It's fine. It's not amazing, but it's a mediocre book. Then we have the book Diversity Alliance, which this was not one of the ones I had read when I had first read this series. So reading this for the first time recently was excellent, and this is a very deep and thought-provoking book. This book asks really good questions and provides really good answers and leaves other questions up for the readers to interpret. I thought this was a delightful book. Then you have Delusions of Grandeur, which did not live up as much as my memory of it did. It was a mediocre book. And then you had Jedi Bounty, which was a very entertaining book, asked a lot of good questions, produced a lot of great imagery and great historical contexts and great understanding, and also just had some great action and great character development. And then you have this final book, The Emperor's Plague, which just wraps everything up in a nice, neat bow. It's done beautifully. It's not all roses and sunshine and stuff. There's some sadness to this series, but let me talk about the book overall. The first thing that I want to gush about this book is the two sequences in particular. There's one sequence in the New Republic Senate where the young Jedi Knights are basically brought before the Senate to testify to the Senate about the Diversity Alliance and their experiences with the Diversity Alliance in the previous books. And all of the senators, or not all, most of the senators do not believe them and think it's a load of hogwash. And it ironically reminds me of a scene in Phantom Menace that would come out about a year and a half after this came out. So it's kind of funny that they seem very similar. But in this sequence, the senators provide good, logical explanations based off their information. You know that the Diversity Alliance is bad, and you know why their members are bad, and why their leader, Nola Tarcona, is evil, and why her plan is evil. You know that as a reader. But what Kevin Anderson and Rebecca Moesta do is put you in the shoes of these senators, and they say, from their perspective, what do they think? And so the senators make well-reasoned arguments for why they wouldn't trust a bunch of kids who decided to disobey orders and go and sneak into a legitimate government's facility, and make arguments for why the steps that government made were necessary or understandable steps. So the logic, the internal logic that Kevin Anderson and Rebecca Moesta used was brilliant. They could have done what a lot of kid writers or writers for kids books do and just say, "Oh no, we don't believe you. You're a bunch of kids," and done that. But instead, they take the time, and it's very quick. It's like, I think, just one chapter, but it very expertly and deftly explains the logic of the situation really well, and I appreciated that. Speaking of taking the logic of a situation, there's another sequence a bit later in the book where an investigatory team is sent to Ryloth to investigate the Diversity Alliance. And when they get there, first of all, you see some logic of, okay, if you're the Diversity Alliance, what do you do to buy yourself time? And they go through that a little bit on the Diversity Alliance side. But they also have a moment where one of the members of the Diversity Alliance is debating with the investigatory team and is basically outlining why this is a biased team and why the Diversity Alliance isn't being treated fair. And you believe as a reader they're being treated fair because you're on the side of the New Republic. But again, Rebecca Moesta and Kevin Janderson do an excellent job of providing that internal logic and providing an explanation for why the other side feels legitimately about their beliefs. And it's actually, makes you think, you know what? They've got a point. I don't agree with them, but they've got a point. And so I thought it was just great writing. And again, this is so short. This is just as short as all the other books, and yet there's so much packed into the dialogue and into the writing of the words used. And I really appreciate that. Some writers can write a book like this and nothing of importance happens, and also no important themes, or at least if it's a theme, it's like so heavy hitting. But this is critical thinking, I think, that kids would do well to learn from, and kids might, while reading this, start using this kind of critical thinking outside of just reading the book. So I really appreciated that. There's also a bunch of action sequences, particularly the second half of this book is just one long protracted action sequence, which oftentimes happens with finale books. If you read the book Jedi Under Siege, which I read a while ago, this book was the finale of the Shadow Academy arc, and it also had a very long protracted action sequence towards the end. I think that they're both well done. I think that what makes this action sequence so interesting is that there's so much writing on it. With Jedi Under Siege, you feel like it's just the Jedi who are under attack. This is not a galaxy-wide threat. It could become that one day, but this feels really small. It feels kind of like it's Luke's battle versus the Shadow Academy. The good guys versus the bad guys on a small scale. Whereas with this book, you're dealing with the Emperor's plague, a plague that could literally wipe out all of humanity and perhaps even some human-adjacent species. And because of that, it feels more galactic on the scale. And there is a kind of Rise of Skywalker moment where some good guys come to save the day, but it is well established and makes logical sense why that would happen. And so I appreciated the way that was set up. There's also a sequence where one character sacrifices themselves for another character, and I'm being very vague on who that is to avoid spoilers, but it's done very much in a Wrath of Khan way. If you have seen Star Trek The Wrath of Khan and you read this book, you will instantly make the connection. Oh, I totally see where that happened. There's no cheesy dialogue to hit you over the head, but if you're a savvy film fan and book fan, you will be able to connect the dots. But I really enjoyed that sequence, and there are consequences. This is a happy ending to the book, but it is not everything works out perfectly. There are consequences to the characters' decisions, there's consequences to the villain's decisions, there's consequences across the board. And yet it's still a good ending, a very happy ending. Kids will love this type of book. So I loved reading this book. I utterly loved it. One of my favorite Young Jedi Knights books, really. To give my overall thoughts on the series, I'll say that I think that the Shadow Academy arc is a better arc, and the books in the arc are overall better. However, I will caveat that by saying that this is a better finale to an arc than Jedi Under Siege was as a finale. This is still a great finale. Don't get me wrong. This is still a great finale. This is a superb finale. And there are still 3 more books I still have to read. And I don't have them. I'll review them later. But I still have 3 more books to read that are like a trilogy that finishes this out. But had this been the finale, like this was the end we got of the Young Jedi Knights, it would have been a pretty satisfying ending. I really, really enjoyed this. And one thing that irked me about the entire arc of these books was that after Zek has been he turned to the dark side after his encounters in The Lost Ones. And so in these books, he is now a dark side user. And then by the end of Jedi Under Siege, he decides to abandon the dark side and go become a mercenary. It's become a bounty hunter. And then he has a realization in this book that's like, oh, bounty hunters don't really have morals. Maybe I don't want to be that because I want to have morals. I just thought, you should have had that thought 5 books ago. I did not like his arc as a bounty hunter. There were some times where he did some great sequences as a bounty hunter, but I did not like Zek as a bounty hunter. He should have been a Jedi. And really, it feels like the arc of his introduction in The Lost Ones, all the way to this book, finally it feels complete. It feels like this is where he should have been. Zek should have been the whole time. So I am very happy with that. So I loved the book The Emperor's Plague, and I'm so glad that I'm finished with this arc of books. It's been delightful all the way through. If you've read The Emperor's Plague, what were your thoughts on it? Did you catch that Wrath of Khan kind of reference in the story? And how do you view the Young Jedi Knights books? Which ones are your favorites? Which ones are your least favorites? Let me know all those thoughts in the comments section down below. And until next time, I'm Jonathan, and thank you for watching.